So good morning, everyone. In a while, we will start our webinar. We'll just wait for some more minutes for the attendees to arrive in our webinar session. And so if you guys want to write your questions, you could do so with in your panel or in the spot where where you could write your questions. Also, you could use the chat window and our colleagues will be following your discussion over there. And so we will have time to accommodate your questions right after our presentations. So good morning, everyone, again. I think we could start. And in any case, this webinar will be recorded, so everyone will get to see what they missed in case they came in a bit later. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Angelique Lusuan, and I work for ICANS. And here with me today are some of my colleagues also from the FETFX team, and as well as our guest speakers. So we have Marta Calderaro, our project coordinator, Claudio Rocco, who works with us in ICANS and is one of our journalists, and as well our guest speaker for today is Matteo Serra from Fondazione Bruno Kessler. So today we'll be talking about communicating EIC Pathfinder results online. And this is just the program which I think we've shared with you. We'll be talking about FETFX and the upcoming event called Future Tech Week, and we'll be looking at why we need to communicate our research and why we need to do it online, and share our experiences, not only from the FETFX platform, but also from our guest speaker today. So here we are, and I'd like to give the floor to Marta to talk about FETFX and the Future Tech Week.
Hello, thank you, Angelique, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I'm Marta Calderaro. I'm a national contact point in Horizon 2020 for the Horizon 2020 Future and Emerging Technologies, as well as ICT program. And we are coordinating within the Italian Agency for the Promotion of European Research the FETFX project. So I'm going to introduce you the project. I would like to change the slide or share my screen if possible. Let me know, Angelique. Thank you. So what is the FETFX project? This is a coordination and support action dedicated to communication and outreach. We have started our project within January 2019, and we are going to finalize the project in mid-2021. We are 4 entities, APRE, ICANS, which are hosting this webinar, as well as Zabala Innovation Consulting and UTIMA Technology Management, which is as well an innovation consulting. We can change this slide. So which are the FETFX objectives? We are basically supporting the communication, outreach, and engagement within the future and emerging technology ecosystem, as well as in its transition to the European Innovation Council Pathfinder through a set of communication campaign, a mix of tools and media, as well as through engagement activities such as the Journalists in the Lab, the Future Tech Week, which I'm going to talk in a while, the FETFX fields, and also webinar. The main important thing is that we would like to simulate the collaboration and debate among a set of multiple stakeholders, so within policymakers, but also research and innovation community, as well as tech, scouts and investors, and our main services are free of charge. So we are based on the FET project baseline. So thank you. So we are based on the experience made within the FET project, where we have reached 100,000 people through our online engagement, as well as 200 individuals which were participating in our FET events and 86 FET-funded projects. One important thing that we have reached is our website, which won in 2018 the Web Awards.eu. So it was a great experience to participate and win this award. So I'm going to talk to you about the FETFX project. We are basically starting our approach with co-creating stories with our FET ecosystem, with our engaging the FET projects, then supporting them in their communication attitudes, as well as distributing their results, their stories through our web tools, social media, as well as the information hub, and through the engagement activities which I was citing before. You can change this slide. I cannot see. I'm sorry. Thank you. So the FETFX Communication Hub, our website, the main important hub to give to you inspiring stories and the results about the future and emerging technologies around Europe. We communicate through a set of channels, of course, new releases, journalistic articles, which also Claudio is supporting us on this, as well as, and you can change the slide, video interviews. I cannot see the slide turning, sorry. Thank you. You can also change for the second one. Thank you. We have also a FET project database, which is making you able to filtering by team, so by the category on artificial intelligence, biotech, culture and society, energy and environment, nanotech and materials, but also filtering by results. So if the project has registered patents or has launched his startup or spin-off. We have also, and you can change this slide, a repository, a resource repository, which is giving to you all the knowledge and all the information regarding the FET ecosystem, all different reports, but also guidelines and dissemination material that you can use as FET projects. You can change also this slide. Thank you. And of course, since we would like to co-create results with you, we have a always open call for editorials where you can send to us your news or your event so that they are going to be published on a bi-monthly timeline within our e-magazine. You can change the slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the Future Tech Week. The Future Tech Week is an online event, a promotional campaign that we are going to run within the 21st and 25th of September, dedicated to celebrate the European Innovation Council Pathfinder and Future and Emerging Technologies innovative results. Who are the key actors here? Of course, researchers, innovators, but also policymakers, because this is going to be hosted within the research and innovation days that are going to be held during the same week. So how you can contribute to the Future Tech Week? You can give to us by checking the information that are in our website, futuretechweek.fetfx.eu. You can contribute through videos, through online events, through documents, as well as by simply a social media account with Twitter or Instagram post using the hashtag EICFTW. Of course, you can use what you have already as well. You can contribute with novel results. So it's up to you to decide how to contribute to these virtual exhibition spaces, which I would like to remind are going to be showcased within the Research and Innovation Days as well. So you can change the slide. This is not the first event that we are hosting. The Future Tech Week was held also in a past edition in 2019, and we have hosted 40 events as well 85 involved projects where we have reached 1,000 people through the online engagement. Thank you for the Future Tech Week. Then I would like to introduce you this novel FETFX publication, which we are launching today. So it's a pleasure for myself to introduce this publication, Voices from the Future. This booklet is giving to you the possibility to identify which is the policy evolution towards the European Innovation Council Pathfinder, but also the innovation and the scientific discoveries that are hidden in our Future and Emerging Technologies program during the past 30 years. So we can go to the next slide. Finally, and this is my latest slide, of course, FETFX is not the sole coordination and support action which is supporting the Future and Emerging Technology Research and Innovation community. We have the FET project, which is dedicated to observe which are the early technological trends and emerging trends, but also supporting the project building in a proposal phase. Defect briefing, coordination and support action dedicated to support the innovation opportunities and accessing future markets, as well as the access for SME NCP network dedicated to the accelerator and Pathfinder within the European Innovation Council. As Angelique was saying, we are going to record this webinar, and you will be able to find the recording within the dedicated page of this webinar within our FETFX website. So thank you.
So thank you, Marta, again for the wonderful introduction. I'll just try to move on to the presentation I will be presenting. So thank you again for attending our webinar. We will try to make this webinar helpful for you guys who are trying to prepare your communication materials online, not only for the Future Tech Week, but also beyond that. So as we were saying, many, I think, might be asking why we need to communicate our high-tech disruptive research. So I guess some of you, or maybe many of you, are aware that there's an ongoing struggle between the science and society. Scientists are often would often think how communicators or journalists in particular are trying to misrepresent their science and makes their science look meager or wrong. But at the same time, the communicators have this issue and tell other people that scientists often try to make things so complex that it's hard for people to grasp what they're saying. So as you can see, this is a communication issue. But then, while some of you might not be convinced still why we need to communicate our science, Jeremy in his book, Secret Life of Science, has told us that science has an ecosystem. So this has to be nurtured not only by you guys, the researchers, but also by other people. That could be the public, that could be the policymakers, and that could be the other stakeholders. So by communicating, we do not only let the society be aware of your research and the impact it has, but also be able to debunk the fake news and the misinformation that we see nowadays, and as well help people in the long run during a crisis by aligning ourselves with stakeholders and make coherent line of actions. And something that is pretty obvious nowadays is the pandemic, on how if scientists are able to work together with other people, they will be able to create more cohesive action plan to address COVID. But these are just some of the many reasons why we need to communicate science. But what if we look at it for future and emerging technologies? So what it's now called as the EIC Pathfinder makes it harder for scientists to communicate because it talks about the future. So whether it be artificial intelligence and IT, biotech and health enhancement, culture and societal change, energy and environment engineering, and as well as nanotech and new materials, it's harder for people to imagine the future or the impact of your research because it's still far-fetched for them. And so one way to address this issue is through storytelling. So in this paper, Storytelling, the Soul of Science Communication, the authors pointed out how storytelling for centuries, even before civilizations have been created, allowed people to be able to recount their knowledge, and to be able to communicate abstract terms. So in this case, FET, or Future and Emerging Technologies, is considered as one of them. But you might ask right now, how do you do storytelling? It's not just a narrative that will gain visibility for you guys, but also help us in avoiding fake news and misinformation, to be able to tell your story that's more than just the data that you're collecting nowadays in your experiment. And through storytelling, you activate some neurotransmitters for your audience and let them be able to experience what you want them to experience, and then let them be engaged. Now, there's so many theories about storytelling, but I won't be going through all of them. So the first theory that I could share with you is Freytag's pyramid. So this was introduced by a German playwright called Gustav Freytag. So what he did was that he divided the story into 5 acts, and this is commonly seen in Shakespearean dramas. So first, the narrator introduces the characters in the setting, and then introduces the conflict. By then, the protagonist will need to address this, and so reaches a climax, and once that's done, leads to a falling action, and then ends with a denouement. Nowadays, there are also more theories that are more popular. So one of them is Christopher Booker's 7 basic plots. So Christopher Booker in his book would point out that there are 7 ways to tell a story nowadays. This could be overcoming the monster, rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, rebirth, comedy, and tragedy. I won't be able to go through them, but you could dig in deeper by clicking on the link that I provided in this slide, or go through the book itself. So basically, on the right, you see 2 common plots you could see in science storytelling. So with overcoming the monster, the protagonist or the scientist could face an impossible task, and then by addressing that conflict, be able to have a happy ending. Or through a quest, just like in Lord of the Rings, Frodo will try to search a way to destroy the Ring of Power and to stop Sauron. So he did this with a band of other creatures, right? And so you could repackage that in a way for scientists to overcome the obstacle through a quest, and then complete the mission so that you guys have a happy ending. Now, lastly, another theory which is interesting for some maybe is Kurt Vonnegut's shape of stories. So he points out, similar to the 7 basic plots, there are the uphills and the downhills of a story. And he identified it as the beginning, where you created a baseline of the story, as well as ill fortune and good fortune. So in one of his famous examples, Boy Gets Girl, as you can see in films, the boy tries to get the girl. And usually the boy meets the girl in the beginning, and so everything was wonderful. But then something troubling comes along, and so they need to resolve that conflict and then get back on their feet again later on. So these are just some of the theories that you could explore with storytelling. But how do you apply that with future and emerging technologies? So with storytelling and FET, you create a vision of the future. So on the left side, as you can see, that's screen caps from a film called Blade Runner, which I think some of you might have watched. This was shot in 1982 and depicted of a future which is of 2019. On the right side, you see an infrastructure which was shot in 2018 in Lisbon. So as you can see, the difference is not so big between them. And so this shows us that by envisioning ourselves of the future, we could make it as a reality. Now, what we do with FET and storytelling and communication is that we're creating a thin line with science fiction by recounting stories of our research, as what Aliette de Bodard pointed out in this Nature article. Science fiction can tell us what research will lead to. So by allowing ourselves to communicate our research and the possibilities, we allow people to see the reality that we've been envisioning for the rest of the world through their eyes. And so I end with that note. Sometimes reality is too complex and stories give it form, as what Jean-Luc Godard would say. Moving on, how do you communicate those online? of course, for right now, I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm going to ask you if you have done any form of communication activity online this year. So yeah, I only gave you 1 minute, but you could reflect about it later on. So it showed in the poll that 76% of you said yes, and 24% of you said no. And so the next question I would like to ask you is this: do you think it is useful to communicate about your research online? So I closed the poll, but you could think about it. So many of you, 97% in fact said yes, and I'm happy to see that many of you realize the importance of communicating online. So let's go back to the presentation. As many of you are fully aware, communication has happened from what you see on the left, where you could just merely exchange information or have a dialogue in a bar or in a coffee shop, but then ended up with this on the right. And this is most especially felt with COVID right now. So what we see is that is one of us just sitting in a corner and just writing and exchanging information through a phone or through a tablet or a computer. And so there's the dilemma. Now we're living in a great digital age, are we able to keep up with the time? So as you see, research is on one side of this image, and so is society on the other. And that's you in the middle, and you would need to find a way to get through this bridge and let research and society get connected. Would that be easy for you to cope? It seems that for Amy and a bunch of researchers from London School of Economics would fully agree. In their book, Communicating Your Research with Social Media, which is a highly recommended read, they created or identified this research life cycle where researchers could exploit or make use of social media as their tool for them to get inspiration from other people, to collaborate with them, and to do their research and disseminate their work through social media again, and then to be able to engage in a larger crowd their research and create an impact in the long run, and thus teaching more about what they do. Now, as you see, we get to see all this content, whether it's not only scientific, but all kinds of content online, and it's hard for us to stand out. Now, before we go any further, we will be also giving you tips to help you with that. So the guide questions you need to start thinking in your head are these: who do you want to address your research to? Which channels do you want to reach out to? to use to reach out to them. Which messages do you want to convey to these people, and how do you want to express them, whether it's a photo or video or so on. By answering these questions, you'll have a better idea on building how to build your online presence of your project. And of course, more of this discussion could be referred to in our previous webinar called Your Effective FET Communication Strategy, and I provided in the link of this slide, and you can access it once the webinar is over, of course. And now, if you have everything covered, and once you hit the submit button, you need to realize something though. Users can deal with your content in two different ways. It could be through outreach and through engagement. Outreach means to say that the people get to see your content. So the questions as a content creator would be the following: how many people will be seeing my post? And among these, are they the ones I want to target? Now, as for engagement, this is about users engaging with your content. It could be a share, it could be a like, it could be a comment, and so on. So the question you need to ask yourself is whether what I'm doing is good for me to keep in touch with these people I have in mind of reconnecting or connecting, and if this will allow me to strengthen my ties for further collaboration also after the project's over. Now, by having a good sense of how to communicate online, you would ask, but which tools do I need to use? And that's why we're hosting this webinar, to help you have give you a sense of what you could do and cannot do. And so we start with the FETFX platform. Now, these are just some of the media formats that we have. And of course, as I said, you would want to know which one to choose from. And so my next question would be the following: which of the tools do you think you want to experiment with in the long run? And you could answer more than one, so you could try to click as many options as possible. I know it takes some time for this question, so I would give a bit more time for you to answer this. So I've closed the polls, and I see that majority of you love to do videos and podcasts, and then afterwards articles and news, online discussions, and then other visual tools. Okay, that's great. So we will be covering most of this, and we hope that we give you some tips for you to start with. Now, Marta has already explained to you what the FETFX website has done. So in 2018, we won the Laurel category in the EU Web Awards. And as you can see, since 2017, we have been putting up several articles, news, videos, and events that feature the FET projects and also the different people that's part of it. And one of the main content that we produce in FETFX is the articles and the news. So you might be wondering, how different are these two? With articles, you see that these are written by journalists. So they have to be written with a journalistic approach. That means to say they have to cover different angles. They don't only get interviews from you guys in the project consortiums, but also from external resources. So they have to give a very unbiased view. And at the same time, they will be using a language that should be recognized by everyone, since this will be read also by people who often subscribe to newspapers or to magazines. Now, on the other hand, press and news releases are written with the objective of public relations. So you need to write these stuff if you want to promote the activities of your project and of your consortium. And of course, this will be done in a more institutional language, and it's easily approved once all the project consortium partners fully agree with these press and news releases. Now, the good thing about these media formats is that, as you may know, it's easy to do. People will read, and you will gain easily wide exposures and shares. On the other hand, it will be hard at one point to convey some complex information, most especially if these articles or news have to be written in a very short manner because of the character limits. But as well, since there's so much information in the internet, it could easily get lost in the crowd. And if this was written with in a bad way, you could gain bad publicity, and that's not good. So if you want to know more about this stuff, we also did a thorough recommendation about writing articles and news in our best practices communication kit, and have a look at what Marta just announced earlier, our booklet where we covered highlights of FET in stories and interviews over 30 years. Now, what we do in the FETFX platform is more than just telling the story of your science. We also explore other things that could be the challenges that you have, the innovation that your research has, the impact they will have, the legacy that it will bring, and also the people like you guys in FET, in your FET projects. So with the FETFX platform, we have the opportunity to produce journalistic articles through yours.com, which Claudio Rocco is also part of. So he will explain to you more in detail about videos. But as you can see here, this is one of our video interviews that we have with Paolo Dario. And as well, we produced news and also Q&A interviews of people. So as you can see, these are the women from By Accent Project, and we interviewed them one day for the International Women's Day. And so these are just the general tips, but if you want to go over more in depth, you just have to look at the resources I've just mentioned. With journalistic articles, since you guys are the scientists, you're not the ones who should be writing this. It should be the journalists. So what you need to remember is that you need to make them understand your science. Don't use technical jargon. Same principle applies when you need to write your news, right? So you need to use a fresh and easy understanding writing style, and also choose a catchy title. But if you get stuck along the way, of course, you need to remember to be open and to ask for help, whether it's from a colleague or from someone you know who can write. And now I will pass the floor to Claudio to talk more about videos.
Okay, thank you very much, Angelique. Was very interesting, and you said already, you introduced very well some of the things I will say. First of all, I present myself. I am a television journalist since 40 years, so very long, very long career. I've started with the RAI, Italian television, and then worked also many years as responsible of scientific magazine, video magazine in Euronews, the European television. So I am a very good witness, Angelique, for say how the language of videos changed during all these years. I didn't start in the 50s, as Angelique put here. I started in the late 70s, but now I have to say that since the beginning, the language, the television language changed a lot. You see here that in 2022, 82% of all consumer internet traffic will be on YouTube, and that's really important. So I first let me say, can you you are make now so you are presenting, okay, articles and news, videos are quite important, podcasts and webinar. Okay, so next slide, please, Angelique.
I think this is the slide, or do I move on?
Can you go ahead with the slides?
Angelique, it's open the survey at the moment.
Oh, okay, I will hide it. Okay, sorry.
Okay, okay. What I was saying is that the language in these years changed a lot. We have to understand now that the attention of the viewer is very short, very limited. So we have to convey the message in a very short time, and the starting, the beginning must be very important. I've been working, I've been producing videos for some project of some FETFX project. In particular, I will talk here about Levitate and Assisi. Also in Brainbove, I participated, but I will explain later more about these project that as you can see here in this slide should be really filmed in a very journalistic approach. So the first point, Angelique, next slide, that is the most important point. The most important point in my eyes is the language. The language must be clear, journalistic, and less institutional. What does it mean? That first of all, in my eyes, as you said, Angelique, the scientist and the journalist must be two different persons. I am a good test because I've been working 40 years as a journalist in science, and I am not a scientist. So I say, if I understand, it means that everybody can understand. That's the first test I will do with myself. But be aware of that. You should use a person that is not a scientist to test what you are saying, because sometimes, very often, scientists don't understand they are speaking a difficult language. For them, the language they are speaking is simple and clear, and it is not, because they are used in their everyday work to use this kind of language. So you have to make scientists speak clearly without, that's very important, denaturating the meaning of their research. So what they say must be simple, but at the same time, right and in line with their research. And I want to add that sometimes scientists are very scared in front of the camera. I had experiences of scientists speaking to me very well. When the camera is running, they stop. They are scared. So the journalist must be also, in a certain way, a psychologist to help scientists to speak clearly. The other thing you must use, as I said before, journalistic language without use institutional language or press release language. So you must use a journalistic language, taking care, as you said very well, Angelique, in particular, of the beginning. The beginning must be catching the viewer. Okay, it's interesting for me. Okay, I will go ahead viewing. And knowing that the time of attention of the viewer is very short, especially in the web, in YouTube, etc. You see something 20, 30, 40 seconds. If it doesn't catch your attention, you pass to another thing. So, and in all this year, the things are changing in the way I said, that the message must be conveyed in a very short and journalistic way. Then it's important also to ask the opinion of the independent scientists. So a scientific report must help the viewer to create his own opinion. So you have maybe sometimes opinion of independent scientists that are not in the project, or they have maybe sometimes an opinion that is opposite to the one of the project. So the viewer can create his own opinion. Then another very important thing is the text. So in a report you have interviews, but you have also a text, and the text that's normally is read by a speaker in off, that you don't see. I mean, you don't see the face of the speaker, but the words must be very well linked to the picture you are seeing in this moment. They have to accompany the pictures, and we will demonstrate with an example in few minutes. Next slide. Exactly. The first sample is the project Levitate, a project that I've shot in Glasgow. What is Levitate? Levitate is a project that wants to introduce a radical new human-computer interaction paradigm. The aim of the project is to create new displays that you can physically touch. Displays made of levitating matter, levitated polystyrol matter in the air, just using sound waves. So the sound waves make the little polystyrol levitate. How to demonstrate that? In the most simple way, putting on the left. Thank you, Angelique. Putting on the left a traditional display. So you see here, for example, levitating matter, and you see the levitating polystyrol. But then you have a comparison. No, it's not. You didn't start from the beginning, Angelique. You did. You have to go to the very beginning when I show at I think the second 20, a little bit after this. Okay. No, but you have a picture when you see on the left a traditional. No, it is a beginning, but it doesn't matter. You have a traditional screen, and at the right a screen. No, was in the first 40 seconds. I don't know if you want to. Okay, here. Okay, this picture. You have on the left a traditional screen, and at the right a screen made of levitated matter. So the viewer can understand very well the difference of these two kind of screen, and the text is explains this difference very clearly. The next project I was filming, the next slide, Angelique, is this one, Assisi BF, is understanding animal behavior by introducing small robots into honeybee society, also in a swarm of fish. But that's very, if you can see the first seconds, you see, you can stop the picture, the picture before. You can see that these cylindric plastic structure are the robotic bees. So the spectator may imagine that you see a little animal, a little bee, a robotic bee. No, these cylindric plastic objects are robotic bees that the bees recognize their companion. These structure can influence the bees. Through these, you can study the behavior of the bees, very important. So you have to explain in the test, these cylindric structure is a robotic bee, and the text must be very well self-explaining. But in the same project, I've also done an interview with Martina Sopek, a scientist, and she speaks about the life in the lab. She speaks about their research, but I wanted also to add some personal details. For example, she said at a certain moment, I go to office every day with my dog. You can see here my dog. So the viewer can also have a human view of the person. If you consider that this interview is only long 1 minute, 1 minute 30, it's nice to introduce the work of the person, but also a little bit, few seconds of a personal touch that make the interview more agreeable to be seen. Okay, that's. I think my time is over. I hope it was clear what I wanted to say. But in any case, I'm quite open to your questions, and if you want to put forward any question, I'm here to answer. And as I said, I've been working so many years in telling the science to the public, I can maybe add something later in our webinar. Thank you very much, Angelique.
Thank you again, Claudio, for the very insightful presentation about video. So another thing also about videos, which is pretty short, I think, as you some of you might have seen earlier in Marta's slide, is that we did a bunch of videos which were not journalistic. So this is not shown in an editorial platform, that in a more journalistic website, for example. So what we did was we created all these videos, which were the series of video interviews that we had with experts on in the Innovative Enterprise Week in Bucharest last year. So what we did was we wanted to promote the ongoing transition between FET from FET towards EIC Pathfinder. And so what we did was we created this common theme or question all the interviewees could answer. But first we did a background check, of course, on each of them, identified their interesting angles or interests that they have that's unique based on their profiles, and then find a question that's more specific based on their experience and connect them to this more generic question that you see in order to better present these series of videos. So that's just one other way of showing a video in case you want to prepare your own project videos. Now, something which we haven't done in FETFX, but could be a very useful, for you guys, especially now that we're talking about communicating online, is visual narratives. So what is nice about them is that you could make very visual materials and tell a story at the same time about your FET research and experience. So that could be infographics, comics, sketch notes, and data visualization. Of course, I'll be talking about some of them, and Matteo later will talk more about the sketch notes. Now, data visualization, as many of you might be fully aware of, the data that you collect in your experiments are not forgotten or should not be wasted. They could be of use. As what Hans Rosling would point out in his book, Factfulness, when things are getting better, we often don't hear about them. This gives us a systematically too negative impression of the world around us, which is very stressful. In fact, it would be useful if people know more about your research, not only about the general impact, but also some of the process or the obstacles you stumbled upon, and present them through your data. Here, of course, are a series of videos you could watch in your free time to get inspiration about visualizing data. Now, coupling that with infographics, the great thing about these two formats is that they're attractive looking, and you could ingest a lot of complex information through graphics. At the same time, you need to understand that this is very time consuming, and you need to know certain tools to produce these materials. So that could be photo editing, illustration, even video animation if you want to do explainer videos. And at the same time, you need to understand which information, among all the information you have at your fingertips, do you want to use, and then repackage it into a more digestible and visually pleasing manner. So once you understand that disadvantages are not of a problem for you, then you could proceed in producing these materials. Now, the next thing I would like to talk about, which is not known by many, is science comics. So comics, as many of you might think of, could be very childish, could be not taken seriously, and only talk about superheroes and the impossible. Well, in fact, science comics could be very useful for future and emerging technologies because we talk about the impossible and make it present it as though it's real and tangible. And at the same time, it helps readers to digest our information through making graphics that are less serious. Now, I think some of you might know PhD Comics. On the left side is just one of the different comics that he's presented in his website. George Sham is the creator of it, and he said that one day he was confronted by Daniel Whiteston from UC Irvine, and he said in this video, as if you click on the link here later on, he said that Daniel called him and asked if he could write a comic about the Higgs boson, and George was, of course, very lost, and he was not sure if he was hearing this question right. And of course, Daniel said, yeah, I feel like people are really curious about this topic. And, you know, the media is not doing a very good job explaining what it is. So in a way, science comics could be used as an avenue to present actually very complex information. And in fact, they released a book recently called We Have No Idea, where they talk about Higgs boson and all the stuff that people still don't know about some astrophysics concepts. Now, of course, to dive in, I asked help from two guys. One is a science writer / comics writer, and as well as a science comics illustrator, Rick Worth and Jordan Culver. And they produced this cool comics called Hocus Pocus, which you can access freely online. So they talk about the debunking all the science that took place in mystic experiences over the years. And they recounted to me what it was working with a scientist when producing these comics. So they said, for science comics, what's nice about it is that it's catchy and it's able to tell a story in a short and effective manner. And anytime, anywhere, you could read it at your own pace and still bring good emotional resonance. But at the same time, they have challenges, of course, during the production where you have to collaborate very well and so should find a middle ground to consume so much effort and time because of the fact checking the research and to be able to respect a degree of creative confinement. So once you work, let's say with an illustrator, the illustrator has to understand that the sky has a limit and so has to still present stuff in a very scientifically correct manner. And of course, this collaboration doesn't come cheap. It could be expensive depending on your budget. And it could also risk being boring if you don't collaborate well together. And so they also gave tips and some things you could think about. You need to know what you can and cannot do. So you need to understand if you're also talented or good at writing comics or drawing comics. And if now that you understand your limits, you also have to understand your budget. And doing so, you can start reading about comics or some comics and know about the artists and the writers behind them and see their tone and style and which you would like to work with. By scouting them and agreeing to work with them, you need to learn their craft as well and trust their creative side of doing things. Since you're the scientist, you are the ones who can check about the consistency, the correct, whether the science they're presenting is correct. But to draw it well, you need to trust the artist. And also in the process, if the collaboration goes well, you need to avoid the risk of presenting a visual essay or a textbook. And at the end of the day, since I've been talking about so many stuff related to collaboration, they pointed out that you need to maintain good manners and communication when producing comics, because at the end of the day, it's a collaborative effort. So you could check out their profiles here as I shown in the link. And also they recommended these two materials you could work with to learn more about science comics. Now, before I pass the torch to Matteo, I'd just like to talk about what social media could do other than presenting your research in a website or in a blog. So what scientists might not think about is that might be wondering is whether they want to open or they need to open social media accounts. This is the answer I'm presenting to you right now. So these are just some of the many scientists that I've seen or discovered or interacted online. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more you could connect with. So it's best that scientists be well represented in social media, also to meet the objectives that I presented earlier, such as debunking the false information and so on. So FETFX, in fact, has its own social media, and depending on the platform, we produce different contents that could be through cards and short web videos to catch the attention of the user itself. And so in the long run, we'd also engage with the target audience by sending comments and sending messages, and that could vary depending on the platform. Now, these are just some of the notes you need to remember once you decide to open a social media account, that your content should be attention-grabbing and authentic, that you need time and patience to grow your network. So you cannot just expect 100 or 2,000 followers the day after you open your account. And that to ease you in the process, you could create lists. So you could create somehow like mini address books that you could organize, especially in Twitter, to see how you could identify who to contact with depending on what theme. And also to gain more visibility or attention of your account, you need to identify the key terms. You need to know which hashtags people are using. And so increases your chances to be seen by people outside your network. Maybe I think there's some hesitation. I hope not, but maybe you would think, oh, maybe I could open it later on once I'm ready. You cannot wait for your results to come. So you need to build your connections as early as you can, because at the end of the day, you need time and patience, as I said, to share your stuff in social media. So once you have them ready, you would have a network big enough to spread your content and the word that you want to share, and also spread it through useful accounts. And these are the accounts that we have so far on FET, which are very influential, not just us. I mean, we also have the EIC and also the Future Tech EU, which you could follow on FET and EIC Pathfinder stuff. And at the end of the day, I think scientists would like to know is, what am I doing it efficiently? Am I doing the right job? Worry not. So there are analytics tools to monitor your communication online. So that could be Google Analytics for your website and social media platforms' very own analytics. So by exploring all these tools, you could get a better idea on how to effectively or fine-tune the way you communicate your stuff online. And so I'm going to pass on to Matteo, our guest speaker for today. He's a physicist and a science communicator for Fondazione Bruno Kessler, and he will be telling us his experience on the different tools, which we haven't covered yet.
Okay, thank you, Angelique, and good morning to everyone. And today I will talk about this topic, online tools for science communication, in particular focusing on my personal experience in my institution, in Bruno Kessler Foundation. I want to start, by the way, with the next slide, with giving you very briefly some information about my institution. Bruno Kessler Foundation is not a foundation in the American meaning. It's not a no-profit organization. It's a research center, in part private and in part public, which is located in Trento. Trento is a city in the north of Italy, in particular in the province of Trentino, in the red zone on the map. And Bruno Kessler Foundation is a very particular research center because hosts both scientific and technological research centers, and also humanistic ones. So is an hybrid, very, very particular. actually, the scientific pole is the core for what concerns the research. There are some very important research centers, in particular in the field of ICT, information technology, but also artificial intelligence, nanomaterials, nuclear physics, and so on. And there are about 400 researchers. So you can go to the next slide, Angelique, thank you. What about science communication? Because obviously this is the topic of this webinar. Okay, in FBK, in Bruno Kessler Foundation, there is a communication office, which is dedicated to the ordinary, normal institutional communication. But there is more, because since August 2017, there is a dedicated project to science communication, Cittadini per la Scienza, Citizen for Science. In particular, I am the coordinator of this project, which is funded by the Autonomous Province of Trento. And so the aim of this project is essentially to create a bridge between researchers, between the research world in general, the science world, and the citizens, the public, the passionates, by means a lot of activities. We can go to the next slide. These activities, so here we can see several activities we organized in these years. For example, public conference, scientific aperitifs, also exhibition that bring together art and science and photography. For example, we opened a few days ago an exhibition about a photographic exhibition about the research of FBK. And also more online activities like podcasts, and in particular in the last month after the lockdown, webinars online. And in this presentation, I want to focus my attention in particular on these last two activities, which are strongly related to the topics of this webinar. I want to start from podcast with a very, very brief introduction, general introduction. Podcast is a very interesting phenomenon because today is a very popular media, and we observed in the last 10 years in particular an important growth, an unstoppable growth of both of listening podcasts and also in general about familiarity with podcasting. And in particular, in these two graphics, in the center part of the slide, we have the behavior for United States. But this growth is observable today worldwide, essentially. In particular, at the bottom, you can see the state of podcasting in several countries. And we can see that we have important percentages of listening podcasts all around the world. Okay, you can change this for podcasts in general. Scientific podcasts, for what concerns scientific podcasts, are not an exception. Also for scientific podcasts, we observe an important growth, a sort of exponential growth in the last years. In particular, in these graphics, we see the number of podcasts available in English language in the last 15 years. So what about our podcast? And so we can go to the next slide. In Italy, the general situation for what concerns scientific podcasts is good, but there are not a lot of podcasts also in Italian language. So we tried to start a challenge. We opened last year, firstly, a channel, a podcast channel, which is named the Radio FBK, that hosts several formats. And in particular, the first format we produced, in particular, is the format in which I'm directly involved, is Senti chi ricerca. Senti chi ricerca is a very easy, a very simple format in which, in particular, I interview FBK researchers. Our interview brief of about 20 minutes. And the goal of these interviews is, yes, talking about research, science, and so on, but not only. We want also to talk about topics extra science, in particular referred also to the personal life of the researcher, personal passions, hobbies, all in a very informal atmosphere. So the aim is that the point is often researchers are considered by the public opinion weird people closed in their laboratories without a personal life. We want to show that the reality is different. And so for what concerns the format of this podcast, these interviews are free essentially, but there is also a final part which is fixed, and in this final part I ask to researchers 3 fixed questions, which are also for creating a sort of fil rouge between the episodes. And in particular, I ask 3 personal questions. The first is, who inspired you in your life? The second is, what would you have done if you had not been a researcher? And the third is, what is your relation with religion, with God? So you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Angelique. So far we produced 12 episodes since May of the last year. This is the last. We published it in the last month, in the last week. Beyond Black Mirror, in this case, I interviewed a tech researcher which is a passionate of science fiction. And we talked about the relation between men and machines in our times, referring also to science fiction series like Black Mirror and movies. In the next slide, I want to, yes, we have some technical points. The interviews are recorded usually in studio before the lockdown. Obviously, during and a bit also after the lockdown, we recorded at home. Obviously, the quality of sound is a bit different, but we decided to continue also during the lockdown to record our episodes. The episodes are released on several podcast platforms. The native is Spreaker, but also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so on. The software we use is Audacity. Audacity is a very common software for audio editing. It's free and is also very simple to use, also for beginners. Okay. That's all for what concerns podcast. Now, very briefly, I want also to talk about webinars. So we know that in March of this year, there was a little big problem. The lockdown, in particular in Italy, lockdown. The beginning of lockdown was from the beginning of March, essentially. So it was a problem because in our project we organized a lot of live events with the public in attendance. So we think we had to think new ways to do our job, in particular new format think for online. And so in this situation, we created the FBK Live. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Angelique. FBK Live is a sort of online live show with researchers of FBK, but not only, and experts in general, with the aim to discuss topical scientific issues. In particular, obviously, in that period, the matters was strongly related to the emergence of related to the COVID-19. But the very important thing is that these live events are interactive, because the public can interact by means Facebook and YouTube. It's very simple because essentially the public can, for example, ask a question to a speaker, simply writing a comment in the comment space of Facebook and YouTube. And the question appear on the bottom of the screen. So the speaker can very easily read the question and also to answer. Okay, so far we produced 3 episodes of FBK Live between March and May, but we want also to continue in the new season from the fall. The platform we use for FBK Live is StreamYard. There are a lot of platforms for live broadcasting. In particular, this platform is a live streaming studio, very simple to use, and is interesting that by means StreamYard you can broadcast the event to several social networks like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and so on. Okay. You can change the slide. Thank you, Angelique. Yes, that's all. No, yes, there is a Scienza Essay. The feedback of FBK Live was very good, so we decided also to propose again this format for our scientific aperitifs. Usually, we organize scientific aperitifs in a cafeteria, in particular in the cafeteria of Science Museum of Trento, the Muse. Also, in this case, we obviously changed our program and decided to switch completely this format online, using again StreamYard, and also in this case we had good feedback also for what concerned the interaction of the public and for what concerned also the number of visualization. Okay, that's all. Thank you. And here you can find some useful link for who is interested to our project and to contact me. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you again, Matteo. I unmuted myself, but thank you for the wonderful presentation. I don't know if the audience has any questions, but I have some actually. So maybe some people might be wondering how much of an effort it is it to make a podcast? Do you have to prepare yourself beforehand? Like, do you have to prepare a script and do all sorts of things that are time consuming to produce the podcast?
For what on the podcast?
Yes.
Usually preparing a single episode is an effort very important, because you have to prepare essentially the interview with the researcher. So you have to meet the researcher some year before the recording. Then you have to record obviously the episodes, and then there is obviously also the editing of the material, because usually we record more than 20 minutes, and then we edit with the help of our video maker and of FBK, and so usually we publish 1 episode in a month. This is the usual frequency, but in general we stopped for 2 months during for example the Christmas holidays, but in general 1 episode per month.
Okay.
And Angelique, I forgot I think the sketch notes.
Oh yeah, yes.
Because we have a backup slide, because I think that this is interesting, because one of the special feature of FBK Live, the webinar online, is that during events, there is a sort of live sketching by a visual thinker, which is Jacopo Saquegno. Jacopo Saquegno is an illustrator that in particular very interested to science, and in particular he did an internship in FBK in the last month, and we asked him to participate to the live and with a live sketching. It is very interesting because this sketching, in this sketching, essentially he represented the flow of the conversation, the flow of the discussion live. In particular, in this slide, we can see on the left the work of Jacopo during the episode. In this case, we had the presence of Telmo Pievani, which is a science philosopher, an Italian science philosopher. Yes, on the left we can see the work in progress, and on the right the final result, which is very nice because is a synthesis of the main notes of the conversation, a very original representation of the event.
Okay, thank you very much, Matteo, for this presentation. Just to add a note, Jacopo, I think if you go search for his name, he also offers some lessons to start sketchnoting. So you could try to reach out to him if you guys are interested in this type of way of communicating online. So I have a question. I've received a question, and it's asking how you to Matteo, actually, how you promote a new series of podcasts to start reaching to the public.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Starting from zero is not simple. You have to build a community, essentially. We use a lot social network for building our community. For example, one important tool at the beginning is the use of sponsored posts on Facebook, which are not so expensive, but is very useful, in particular at the beginning. We reached a lot of people. Obviously, we are talking about sponsorship with a target very precise, and also it's possible also from the platform where you publish the podcast. For example, we started from Spotify, from Spreaker. And in that case, if you invest some resources about the chance also to promote your podcast, you can find good results in a few time. Obviously, it's important to fix the target in general when you want to reach public. We started from firstly from a target more close to the science community, and then we go also to the general public. But I think that the first step is starting from social network, because it's very useful.
So I guess you agree fully with me the importance of not just creating the content, but also trying to distribute and share the news about it with using social media, I suppose.
Yes.
Okay, so I think I have a question though for Claudio, for example. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe some scientists would be wondering, how would you try, could they get in touch with a journalist if they want to have an article or a video interview to be produced? Like, is there a process, or do they have to know something about reaching out to the journalistic teams, or do you scout for their news?
Until the moment, unfortunately, we didn't create a double communication. I mean, during my work, we have chosen the scientists to interview. And then only through scientists, we are in contact with other scientists. But I think that now, especially with FETFX, we have a more interactive way to relate with scientists. So I think that scientists are able now to reach us through social media quite easily and propose maybe some ideas for new interviews.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I think for Matteo, do you think people should care or not about finding the right equipment to produce podcasts and also to produce webinars? Like, do they have to find a way to get the right audio, to get the high quality video, or it doesn't really matter if you start simple and then build up once you master skills?
Yes. So I want to underline that I work mainly on the scientific contents. So we have a video maker, a technician that is more involved on the technical part of. I think that, in my opinion, is always more important the content of our podcast or a webinar. Obviously, a good quality help to reach people, to reach public. For example, I talked about the problem with the lockdown with the podcast. In particular, we recorded several episodes at home. Obviously, we are it was not good for what concerned the quality of sound. But we decided to continue because the scientific content are the first thing, and if you have not a good idea, you can also have the better quality possible of sound, of video. I think is not important. The first thing is must be a good idea, a good content.
Matteo, I have a question for you, if it's possible.
Yes.
You know, during my presentation, I stressed the fact that to be a good science journalist, you don't have to be a scientist yourself. But I mean, if you understand, if I understand, it means general public understand. So my question is, are you a scientist by formation, or are you a journalist? And do you use maybe the same criteria I use to realize if a scientist speaks in an understandable way or not?
No, yes, I'm a physicist. I worked also as a researcher before to start working as science communicator and science journalist. So my experience is particular. I think that is not necessary in general to be a scientist for telling science. I think that help. In my case, it's useful because I know how works science, how works research, for example, from inside. So for me, it's more simple to also to interface with researchers. But I think that in general is not. I have very good colleagues that have not a scientific formation and are very, very good journalists, very, very good science communicators. Mm-hmm. And so that from the point of view of public, I think that for the public is not particularly important, this thing.
No, what I'm saying that normally a person that is not a scientist himself is more able to understand when a scientist speaks in a clear way, because a scientist is influenced by his work.
Yes, there is a bias. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it's important when you, for example, in my case, I changed a lot of also of the the way to thinking science, switching from researchers to science communicator. It's important to think not as scientist, but as a communicator.
Do you manage to do that?
Yeah. yeah.
Okay.
Yes, is a slow operation, but it's necessary, I think, for this job.
Okay, so I think Marta has a question, and also there's one more question from the audience. Marta?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I couldn't manage to open the mic. I have a question for both Matteo and Claudio. You have talked about two different type of channels, no? So I want to understand, because Claudio have cited YouTube, Matteo have cited Facebook. How do you use the different social media for your different production, and which are the best ones for you for specific target groups? This is my main question.
If I can start, as we have seen by the graphic, YouTube will be very spread in the future. So I think it is very important. But as I said in my presentation, we have to adapt our videos, the way we are filming, we are producing the video to this particular media. And the way, as I said in my presentation, is to have a very catching beginning, so the people can start continuous viewing, and transform the language, the video language, from the one used in traditional television to a more catching, concrete, brief one, more suitable for YouTube in my case. Matteo, I don't know if you agree with me.
Yes, I agree. For what concerns social network, it's very important to know what is the target of, for example, one particular event. We use mainly Facebook and Instagram, for example, that are very different target. And so, for example, if you have an event which is more for old people or not so young people, is better to use Facebook, because Facebook today is used by people not so young. If we want to engage young people, more young people is better, for example, using Instagram. In general, this is the approach, the better approach to have the to know very well what is the audience of different social network.
Okay. So thank you. I think we're almost done, but there's one last question that has been addressed, but I don't know how to respond because it's for Matteo. So one asked, how can I propose myself or my project to be featured in a podcast? How can I find the podcasts that are relevant for us? I don't know if you have the answer for that.
Sorry, Angelique, can you repeat? Is a proposal for
like how can researchers propose their stuff, like their project, to be featured in a podcast? Do the people who own podcasts have to look for them, or they have to reach out to the one producing the podcast? Like, how is the process? I mean,
so if there is a direct engagement of public in the in general, no. In this case, no. We decide the matters of the episodes. In other initiatives, we engage directly also the public. For example, we have a participatory research project in which we, for example, ask to people to make proposal of research. But for what concerns podcast, no. We had but we had feedback in some case, and obviously we take in account of the feedback we receive. It's very important also to be interactive in this sense.
Okay, so I think we could wrap up the webinar since we're a bit beyond it, some minutes. But we will be uploading these presentations, and if you have any questions for us, people could actually write to us as well. And for Claudio's case, and they could write to me, and I will pass on the question to Claudio. But just some reminder, these are just some of the helpful resources you could jumpstart your communication, and also the presentations of our speakers have some useful stuff. And as well, just check out our latest publication of Voices from the Future, where we include also exclusive interviews, including Anna Maikes from the European Innovation Council. And as well, join us later this September in the Future Tech Week. So start creating now with your content, and submit your videos, your articles, and so on. And yeah, that's it. So thank you guys again. Thank you to our speakers for the lovely webinar. It was quite insightful, and I think the time was not even enough for us to talk about communicating online. So thank you again, and I hope this could be of use for you in the long run. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Siamo fuori onda?
I think we all have to leave, so we can keep in touch after.